I'm delighted to introduce Jo Hawley for this spotlight on, and we're looking at the subject of women in leadership today. Hello there, Jo.
Hi, good morning, Liz. Thank you very much, and good to be here today.
We're really looking forward to hearing from you, and I just wondered to start off if you could share a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I am a senior civil servant. I've been a civil servant for nearly 22 years now. I've worked overseas with the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, also with the Department for Business and Trade. I've worked in a number of government departments in London, including Cabinet Office and the Education Department. I've done bits and pieces of things that weren't entirely civil service, like working in a local authority, working in regional government back when we had that some time ago. But mostly, yes, civil service through and through. My mum was a civil servant as well, so maybe it's in the blood.
So, who or what shaped your early leadership experiences?
Think for me, a lot of what the way that I learn is around seeing what other people do and taking from that what I both want and don't want. So for me, role modeling was really important. And I think that's one of the challenges really when it comes to women in leadership, that you don't often in certain industries get that much female role modeling because of men kind of dominating the kind of higher ranks. And I was very lucky and have been very lucky in my career, including in my early career, to work for some really kind of impressive leaders, including some impressive women. Remembering this morning when I was thinking about these questions, Sean Morgan, who I worked for out in Brussels, who became one of the permanent secretary for the Welsh office, who was, I think, my second boss in the civil service. And she had a huge impact on me because there were certain things that she did and the way that she approached them that, me as a kind of relatively brand new graduate, I couldn't always understand why she was doing them, but I could see that she was very impressive and very effective. And so I spent quite a lot of time in a non-creepy way, just kind of watching how she did things and how she approached things. And there's lots of things that I've taken from her. And one thing in particular that was really important for me was I found that sometimes when I was working with bosses that they weren't available when I needed them, and that kind of good kind of management and leadership and being there for your team, she managed incredibly well. And she would really, she had a kind of system of being, if my door is closed, I really have to kind of deal with something. But when my door is open, I'm accessible. And when you went and spoke to her, although she was an incredibly busy woman, she was with you in the moment. And so I used to put a little post-it note on my desk, which said, be here now, which was, whatever you're doing, kind of be in that moment. And I think that's really important in terms of being a good role model and a good manager, a good leader, is actually being in the moment. We're all busy. We've all got 1,000 things that we need to be doing. But if you're not focusing on that one thing that you need to be doing right now, if you're not focusing on that person that's there in front of you or that group of people, you're wasting a moment. You're wasting the potential of the impact. And as leaders, we cast a long shadow. And so kind of understanding that if you're distracted, not focusing on what the person's saying to you, the impact on the individual's morale, the impact on that person in terms of how they might engage with you in the future or not engage with you. It's really important. So, taking those good examples and things that I learned from people that I worked for, but also when I worked for people who were more challenging to work for and maybe not quite such good leaders and managers, that making sure that I avoided doing those things.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm mindful as well that you've worked across a range of different cultures during your time. So adding that additional layer in, maybe we can just explore that one.
So, Jo, can you tell me, has any particular experience shaped your leadership style?
Going out to China, I was a brand new mum. I arrived in Guangzhou with a 6-month-old child, and obviously that created a certain amount of challenges. But actually, from a cultural point of view, it created a huge opportunity because family is such an important part of Chinese culture. A lot of the women that worked for me, because there was a female-dominated workforce in my consulate, a lot of them worked for us because of the work-life balance that consulate work offered in comparison to the private sector. And a lot of them were kind of mums dealing with similar issues to what I was dealing with. And so in my arrival comms, my kind of arrival speech, or the rest of it, I talked about, the joys of family, the challenges of family, and kind of connecting with a lot of them as a parent. Even when I left, like 3.5 years later, a lot of the kind of team who had written on my card said things like, really appreciate all the support she's given for parents, and, with her coming here with her family. And it was really a way to kind of connect with the team as human beings.
So you actually had to, in some ways, make yourself quite vulnerable and allow people in to see your life beyond that of the workspace, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my inclination is always to be very authentic. That, doesn't mean that I kind of completely wear my heart on my sleeve. We all know as leaders, you can't just be kind of emoting and communicating everything that you kind of think at every moment. But my inclination is to try to be as authentic as possible, and I've worked in jobs that are also kind of quite a high security environment. So it's not that you can, communicate everything at all times. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that understanding where you can show kind of more of that vulnerability, not simply because it means that, not that I'm kind of going into the office and going, oh, I had a nightmare night with my 6-month-old, I'm going to be so tired today, but more a case of just, showing you are a human being and showing that, that's a kind of a shared experience. And I've talked internally in my organisation as well at times about like bullying, harassment, discrimination that I have experienced during the course of my career as well. And I think if you have senior leaders who are being open about those things and are talking about them, you're setting the culture that you want. So you want people that if they are having a difficult time, that they are able to reach out and ask for help. So I do think that authentic leadership is a really important part, of my style.
If we're looking at how we can support the next generation of female leaders and perhaps let the ladder down and allow other women to climb that ladder behind us, how would you support women to do that?
I think it's really important. This is work that I do both kind of internally within my organisation, but also externally in the communities that I've been involved with overseas. So in China, I had a gender network that was kind of out into the private sector that I work with in particular. And so looking at how we support networks of women, particularly young women coming up through the ranks, how we support them. I also think that it's not just about supporting diversity in terms of gender, but also, other aspects. So I sit on ally groups for LGBT plus, for race diversity groups as well. So thinking about how we can be allies to other women, but also allies to other underrepresented groups to create that diversity and that inclusion within our organisation. So I think it was Madeleine Albright who said there's a special kind of hell for women who don't help other women or kind of block other women. I think that's really, really something that we need to have as a responsibility as women. And it's not just women, having male champions is also really important. Having men as allies in this journey, I think, is really important. But
so have you
women,
had female leaders who've supported you over the years? I mean, you mentioned one at the very beginning, but have there been other notable female leaders who've supported you in your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Having somebody to kind of support you, to voice and kind of endorse the fact that you're a very good candidate, that, that kind of sponsorship we aren't always good at as women as well, because you need coaching, you need mentoring, and the mentoring, I've had kind of various kind of mentors, but the people who have the most impact are those who go that bit further into sponsorship and who will kind of say to other people, this person's a really good person, you should absolutely kind of encourage them to apply for your job, that type of sponsorship that encourages women to take the next step, and making sure that we're encouraging them to have confidence in themselves.
So just thinking about the environment that you're currently in what's often perceived to be a heavily male dominated environment, how do you remain authentic to yourself?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because I think that lots of industry, different sectors are still quite male dominated. A lot of our working world was designed for men with the wife at home. That was the way that we have kind of set up the culture that we have around us. And that's still, we've kind of patched on things like, maternity leave and paternity leave as well, which I'm a big proponent of. and more flexible working, etc. But a lot of these things are kind of patching on to a system that was designed for a man with a wife at home. You still do, I think, see quite a lot of the I think it's difficult for young women as well. I, as a young woman, was told you can have it all. You can have your career, you can have a family, no problem. And actually, it's very challenging to have a career and have a family, and particularly because I move overseas, and that's been a big issue for a lot of women who want to go and do overseas postings, because men have tend to have a few more options around. The wife will come with them, use those years to maybe have a baby, maybe look after the children, maybe do something different. And all of the work that we did, for example, in the China network, when we're out in the China network, we were looking at kind of how we could attract more women to come out to China, because of these some of these dynamics that you still get. If you're going to be a successful career woman, choose your husband well. And I feel I have chosen my husband well, that, he's incredibly supportive. And he has a very flexible career because he's a computer programmer. And so in theory, he can kind of do that from wherever. He's also kind of very hands-on parent, which I very much appreciate. He does the bulk of the school drop-offs and school pickups. So just in terms of that kind of traditional wife role, I don't do a lot of that, and it should absolutely be a kind of a shared endeavor. And I think increasingly you do have more households being like that, but there is still a kind of tendency towards traditional gender roles in some places, and in some of the places overseas that I've worked in, it has been more traditional gender roles. So in China, it was certainly more traditional gender roles than it was here. How can you be a leader but be an authentically a female leader, I guess, is the question. Because when I started my career back in kind of the early 2000s, a lot of the senior women that I saw were often kind of playing by the men's rules, and I think there's still a lot of that there's a perception that you need to kind of behave in a certain way in leadership, that it's relatively cutthroat, a little bit assertive come aggressive, in order to kind of get what you want and be where you need to be. I actually working for a boss at the moment who I'd say his kindness is his superpower. He's somebody who is actually massively effective, as well as incredibly kind to people. And one of the reasons why he's so effective is that people just adore him and want to work for him. And I work, sometimes he's telling me things I really don't want to hear. Sometimes I'm sure he's right, but it's very difficult to kind of be cross at him when he's telling me things I don't want to hear, because he's just such a wonderful guy, And I think that sometimes that, as women, we feel we have to be not kind, we have to be tough, we have to be a bit aggressive, that's the way that we can, get to where we want to be. And, I grew up as a kid with Margaret Thatcher in Number 10. And, she was that kind of tough lady that, if there was, a problem, that she'd swing, metaphorically, swing her handbag, right? That this was, that was the model, that was the role modeling that was there. And I think that we need to kind of shift that paradigm as female leaders now. We need to think about how we can bring a more nurturing approach, how we can bring a kind approach, because it's not just for us. There are plenty of men out there who would like the culture to be shifted away from where it is. And I think that would be kind of more positive for everybody, that if we can do that. But sometimes, yes, if we're in this kind of testosterone driven world, it hasn't always played out in a way that kindness as a leadership superpower has been, or kind of the more nurturing approach to leadership has been seen as valuable.
Thinking about the sector that you're in, obviously civil service, I know back in May 2022, it was something like 47% of senior civil servants were female. In your opinion, does the glass ceiling still exist for female leaders? And what are your top hints and tips for women wanting to break through that glass ceiling, if it does exist?
Yeah, I think it's one thing that we need to continue to focus on. You know, I've been in the civil service 22 years, and there's been periods where there's been sustained effort to support women into senior roles and make sure that that is happening. You know, programs that create lots of opportunities. And one of the, you know, there've been various studies and research done kind of across sector that is, you know, talks about how women don't use social capital quite as well as men. So the kind of the networks and the you know, how you kind of work a network and take an opportunity and put yourself forward. You know, for those who have read Lean In, I did very much enjoyed Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In kind of earlier on in my career as well. That was the kind of sit at the table, make the comment in the meeting, ask for the promotion, you know, demand the bonus, you know, things that women don't generally do. And that does tend to then kind of slow you down a bit in terms of promotion to the next level, I think. And so I think there still is a glass ceiling. And you know, Lean In has been criticised for kind of saying it puts it all on the individual woman to kind of say, you know, you women have not done these things. I'm not saying it is that. I think it's a combination. I think it's some things that, you know, we're playing in an environment that, as I say, is kind of not designed for women. It was designed for men. You know, we're being expected to kind of act in a different way that we don't seem to be able to kind of just naturally do as successfully as the men. But there does need to be, you know, systems in place. And I've seen that in the civil service in the kind of periods where there's been a lot of focus on we need to get, as a stated aim, more women into the senior ranks because it is representative of the country that we serve, then that has happened. And the Foreign Office actually have had a really good programme, probably running for at least kind of 5-6 years now, where when you go into the Foreign Office, there is a series of mirrors. And there's lists of kind of senior ambassadors titles, and you can go and look at your face in these mirrors, you see. And this is, you know, to kind of say you can be ambassador to the UN or whatever it is. And you know, that is the kind of visual impact of that program. But there's a broad program sitting behind that about how you support more women into the senior roles in the Foreign Office. And if you look at, you know, our ambassadors overseas now, so our ambassador to China, to France, to Germany, to the UN, to Washington, you know, I could go on. Lots of the big ambassadorial jobs now are being held by women. And that's not tokenism. That's not because those women are being given it because to tick a box. You know, the fact that the majority of the big ambassador jobs are being done by women is because they are all amazing women. But would that have happened if there wasn't such a drive within the Foreign Office in order to kind of support that to happen? Would we have kind of changed our ways sufficiently that we would have so many women in those roles? I don't think we would. And you know, I think those types of programs, the structures that we, you know, support women to do these things is really important.
Jo, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for having me.